Well, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited you're here, and thank you for the songs. That is just rocking. And as you know, our lovely Reverend Julie and Foster and a few of the others are at the Big Sky Retreat in Montana at the moment. So you are blessed with myself and Mara speaking the next 2 Sundays. And Mara is going to be giving our first talk in September on manifestation. Correct? Awesome. So today we're going to be doing Tag Your It. And what that is supposed to kind of set the tone for is that playtime with kids. When you're just running and trying to tag each other and that freedom. So when I was thinking about spiritual recreation and spiritual recreation, I was thinking back when I was a kid. And I thought, wow, you know, we've lost it. At least I have. Because when we were a kid, you had this carefreeness. And the minute the sun was up and you got your Cheerios, you were out the door and you were playing. I could play for hours. My parents wouldn't know where I was. And back in that day and time, I guess, it really didn't matter. Because we were somewhere on the street and we knew we played until it was time to come home and the street lights started to turn on. And you were running and you were going to get to the door before the last one. And then we knew it was dinner time. And you had that carefreeness where you didn't care about the roof over your head. You didn't care about anything. You just wanted to play. And thank God for parents, because they took care of all that for us, you know. Whew. And I had some great parents, I do. I know I was blessed. But my mother remembered how to play. My father, not so much. Dad was kind of the staunch guy. He wore a uniform, you know. He was in the National Park Service. And so he had to stay serious a lot. But every once in a while, I remember rolling around in the living room. We had a big Malamute dog. And she was about 120 pounds. And she, when I was about 9 months old when we got her. And so she became my buddy and my teddy bear. And so I, you know, would have a hold of this poor thing, and I would go take my naps. And then I would go out in the backyard, and I would go play, and then I would go crawl under Mom and Dad's bed with this poor puppy. The poor puppy and I did everything together. But I was raised that she was kind of my sister. And I don't think a lot of kids got that opportunity, and they might have missed out. But Taku was my sister. And so I can remember as she got bigger into 120 pounds, we would play in the living room. And my dad would get her to grab the bottom of our pant leg and play tug-of-war. And we would squeal as we got drug around the living room. You know, and of course, Dad's trying to save us, right? You know, he's pulling us back. But that's tickling, you know? And it was just moments of sheer ecstasy. And there was no care in the world. And I would see my dad laugh till he almost hurt. Mom, on the other hand, is sitting in the other room going, oh. And she's trying to study for her exams while she was in college. Wasn't real thrilled with us at the time, probably. But my mom remembered how to play, and she always made everything an adventure. So in the National Park Service, you move around a lot. And so we would uproot from one place, and we would move to the other. And the other place might have different cultures. We moved from the Navajo culture to the Crow culture in Montana. Then we moved to Washington, D.C. That was kind of a culture shock. Believe me, that took a lot of adjustment for all of us. But my mom made it fun, because here we were uprooting our friends, our family. We weren't doing it. We had no idea what was in store for us. And my mom would make it this little adventure where she would pack all of the clothes that we loved to wear, but were outgrowing, and she'd pack all our good clothes and put it in the moving van. And so we had like 4 little outfits that we would wear through the whole summer as we were moving, and we were growing out of them. And we thought that was awesome. Right? Mom told us it was. So we were thrilled. Mom only had 4 outfits to wash. So that worked for her. But she always made it this fun adventure. And we would be driving along, and she would, you know, we never played really the I Spy game, but you had to find something out there to talk about. And so we would always be watching our environment, watching what there was, what was different, why was it different. And I remember these philosophical conversations in the car. And I remember singing a lot of songs. My mother has a beautiful voice. And so she sang all of the good old folk songs in the car. And, you know, I found a peanut and love, what is it, If I Had a Hammer, and I've got Love, 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 all these different songs, and we'd be belting it out down the highway. And I think that would be at the point Dad was wishing we didn't. But we always had the fun part of it. And when we'd arrive at the new place, my parents would immediately enroll us into 4-H. So we had a circle of friends that had a similar interest to us. Because not only were we blessed with the Malamute dog Taku, we were blessed with a pony who was so sweet, her name was Sugar. And we did everything with this pony. And the pony and the dog were actually best friends as well. Because we would get to have sleepovers. And my dad would go out in the yard and he'd look around and he'd say, "It's time for the lawn to be mowed." And we would, oh, that meant Sugar got to spend the night. Because she'd come mow the lawn. And so we'd get really excited. And then in the early morning, you could lay in bed and hear. And we had this part of gravel in our backyard, and then there was grass. And you would hear, and the dog and the pony would play tag in the backyard. On and on and on and on, up until they were both so old. And it was wonderful to see their friendship, because Taku would go out to the horses with us where they were boarded, and Taku would jump out of the truck before we even got there. And she would howl all the way up, and Sugar would come running up to greet her. It was awesome. And it was a wonderful game of tag. It was that freedom and that carefree, and my friend is here, And when we moved finally to Washington, D.C., culture shock capital, we lived in the suburbs. And my mother was not thrilled with the suburbs. My mother had grown up in Grand Canyon, Yellowstone National Park, Big Bend, Texas, Canyonlands, Utah, Denali, or what used to be called Mount McKinley, in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. And then she was plunked down in the middle of Washington, D.C. suburbs in Sterling. So Mom, I think, had one of the bigger culture shocks and adjustments, but every house we ever moved to, my mother would get us enrolled in 4-H, get us enrolled in school, meet the neighbors, and then dig a hole in the backyard. And the hole in the backyard was our mud puddle. And she would fill it up, and we would go play in the mud. I cannot remember a single house we did not play in the mud. There's even one that even Maureen has had to play in the mud in the backyard in Santa Fe. And my mom thought that that was one of the best ways for kids to release and get dirty, because, we're always so worried that they're dirty. Really? Did it matter? They're dirty, but they're having fun. So my mom would just make sure we were dirty, and then she didn't have to worry any further. Mom's on ease. Mom's making it simple. But then people would look at us like we were crazy, and they go, "But they're so dirty." And my mom would say, "Well, that's why God made them washable." And so she would pull out the hose, and then she would chase us around the backyard and squirt us down. And there were peals of laughter. It was just exuberant, and it was so much fun. Mom's laughing, Dad's laughing, the dog's having a blast. And my sister and I, buck naked, running around the backyard getting hosed off. It was awesome. But I can remember that ease and that joy of playing in the mud puddle, making mud pies. I don't know how many mud pies I served my mom and my dad, and they graciously ate them, But we would always play easily, and then we would meet the neighbors and the friends. And in Virginia, I had this little redheaded friend named Molly. Molly and I were inseparable. Molly even played in the mud puddle. We finally talked her mom into it. And so Molly played and Molly was not thrilled about being dirty because she had been clean all her life. And did not understand that concept because it couldn't get further than here. I was like, I had the facial, not Molly. But so we would play all the time, and then all the other kids in the neighborhood would join in, and you would play. And you always thought the kid that wouldn't join was a little odd. How come he didn't want to have fun with us? What's wrong with us? Well, that's fine. We'll make him it. And then pretty soon everyone's playing, and everybody knew everybody. And maybe that was what we think was the olden days, but I don't think so much. I think still kids play with absolutely anybody. One of my other experiences as a kid was we would go to Scarsdale, New York for 2 weeks every summer and stay with my aunt and uncle. And my aunt was probably one of the biggest-hearted, wonderful women I've ever known in my life. And my mother has always said she was the perfect example of motherhood for her. She had 6 kids. And she would always take in children that were called fresh air kids. And I didn't understand what a fresh air kid was. But a fresh air kid was a child from inner city New York that would go and spend the summer in the country. And I really didn't understand that, because how was Scarsdale the country? Didn't get that concept when you've lived in Montana. That's not the country. But for these kids, it really was. And so playing with all of these children in the street and playing kick the can and tag and hide and go seek, they had a really hard time opening up to us and allowing for the play, because they didn't play that way in downtown New York. And so I can still remember Jimmy was the one little boy. He was African American. And Jimmy would stand there with his hands on his hip and say, "I'm not going to hide because you'll never find me." And he was convinced that he was too dark to be found after it got dark. And we would be like, "Oh, give us a try. Try it." And he was hard to find. He found some of the best places to hide. And it was so funny because his perception was it was his color. Our perception was like, how did you fit there? But Jimmy could actually open up and have a great time and finally play with us. Years later, a few years ago, my Aunt Gail died, and Jimmy came to the funeral. She meant that much. Sorry. She was an awesome lady. Molly and I also, I don't know if you remember at the time, Charlie's Angels was big. Oh yeah. I was never Farrah Fawcett. I always wanted to be Kate Jackson, because I liked her hair. It was big, brown, full, and I was like thin towhead. Molly, on the other hand, always wanted to be Farrah Fawcett, because she had red hair. So we would be the Charlie's Angels, and we were convinced that there was a perceived crime going on in the neighborhood, and it was always perpetrated by her little brother, Daniel. And we would sneak along the area around the house, and we'd peek in the windows. We were convinced we were the best spies and the best police officers there were. And Crime Central was up in the poplar tree in front of my house. And so when we were planning what we needed to do, we'd go up in the tree, and we would sit and talk for hours and listen to the tree and the leaves. And for some reason, that also meant we took our socks off. I don't know why. Maybe it was more freedom. I'm not sure. But my mother used to call it the sock tree, because every fall the leaves would fall, and so would all my socks. And my mother would call Molly's mom, and Ayla, she'd say, "Ayla, we got the leaves coming down. We can collect their socks." And Ayla would come over, and they would sort the socks. And then we would finally have socks again for the winter. I don't know why I even had to have socks on to go up the tree. I don't know. But it was a method. But you can only think better without your socks on, I'm convinced. But it's funny with kids because they just have that lightheartedness. And they don't really care what's going on around them. It's that fun. They're in the moment. And when they're in that moment, they are tapped in to spirit. They are tapped into that divine, that imagination, and the storehouse of possibility of God, because they see it all out here. Right? And as adults, I think we start to kind of bring it in, unfortunately. And we don't tap into that same space. One of the things I love about working with the kids in the kids' church is that they have that infinite possibility still. And I get to witness it all the time. And it amazes me how we can be in this subject, talking about this, and in a breath, they're in the imagination. Just boom. And they're seeing it, and they're experiencing it. Last week when the kids were doing the A's and B's, we took the kids outside. And Jared gave me permission to talk about little Aspen. Because Aspen came up. And I don't know if some of you may not know Aspen, but she's the little redheaded little girl who is just a spirit. And she is so adorable. She's out there and she says, come catch me, Daddy. Daddy, 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 come catch me. And she wanted him to catch her as she came down the slide. And so she's right at that age where she's experiencing bravery, and she's going to step out and do it and try it, but I still need the safeguard. I need Dad, because it's just not going to work if I don't have that. And so that carefreeness that kids can feel, because we're there. So she goes up the slide and she comes down the slide. And she goes up the slide and she could have done this all day. Up the slide and down the slide. And just before we're about to come in, she's coming down the slide backwards on her tummy. And she's like trying all these different things, being braver and braver with each step, because Daddy's at the bottom of the slide to catch her. But she was like, in that moment, she was going to try and expand the next level and the next level. What else can I do? What's my next step? Where's my next growth? Where's the next challenge? And she didn't see anything holding her back until we said it was time to come in. Right? So I love it when kids can actually tap into that moment. And we were watching it and experiencing it with huge smiles on our faces. And poor Jared's talking, and then he's like, whoops, she's coming down the slide. And she would yell from the top in the echo, Daddy! And so he would come down and he'd catch her down the slide. But it was so much fun to watch her experience it. And I get to see that all the time in the kids' church. And sometimes when they grasp that concept, it's so amazing. It's electric. And so that's my joy. But sometimes I think I forget, and I get impatient, and I get frustrated, and I frankly I just get old. And I realize, what is my problem? And as a side note, I had a birthday last week, 2 weeks ago. I don't know. See, I still can't tell time. I've told everybody I was 47 for a year. And my wonderful, loving husband informed me I was 46. So I get to repeat the year over again. And I can be seen as aging backwards. So if I can get there and actually learn how to play, I am all in for aging backwards. My girlfriend gave me a card, and I thought it was awesome. And it said, you're only old when your bosoms are not in the same photo as your face. It's like, oh, thanks. That's awesome. So, huh? Yeah, that works. That would work. Thank you. So back to the kids and their playing and learning how to play again. There is a group of men that are now all over the world, but they started in Maine. They went to a Catholic high school, and they considered themselves the rejects of every other group, of every other clique. They weren't jocks, they weren't brainiacs, they weren't whatever. They were this other group of men, or boys at the time. And there was this one period of the day that they were expected to either A, study, or B, go to Mass. And the 10 of them were like, no. So they'd play tag outside, through the halls, mass confusion, running, and it became such a competitive sport for them that they were raucous all over the campus, and they'd play tag. Well, at the end of the year, the last game of tag, the one guy was it and didn't get to tag anybody, and it made him mad. So they had had marriages and reunions and all these things that they'd seen each other at, and finally they're all sitting around a campfire one night, and they're talking, and he goes, I'm really pissed off that I'm still it. I don't think that's fair. And so they decided with the attorney in the group, there's a priest and an attorney and all kinds of guys in this group. They are so diverse. They're from West Coast to East Coast, everything. And they decided that they would re-up the game of tag. And so every February, from the first to the last day, you're open game. And it doesn't matter where you live, because they will fly in to tag you. It didn't matter. They will wear costumes. One of them dressed up as a beggar with a hat and everything, had his cup outside the liquor store, and he tagged Beef. And Beef thought he was getting mugged. So Beef is like, I got this. So Beef goes out, dresses like a grandma in the park, and walks the park, stays in character for almost an hour until George comes. And he tags running as a granny across the parking lot, and he gets George. Tag, you're it. And they do this all the time. So funny that they actually, Beef is the one that has no scruples. They've all admitted it. He tagged one of the other guys at his dad's funeral. And they said, you know what? My dad would love it. My dad would love it because these 10 guys were my life. And my dad thought it was hysterical. And my dad loved the fact, and he would always keep up on the game. You know, who was tagged, who was it, how did they do it? They've jumped out of trunks. It's amazing. But they still remember for that whole month of February that carefreeness of fun and friendship and enjoyment. And I think that's just awesome. I would love to have that kind of wherewithal to do something like that, but they are committed to this, and they are competitive. And I just love it. If you ever want to see anything about it, it's on the CBS News, and it's called Tag Boys. And it's a video on YouTube that you can see. But I always loved the game of tag, but I also loved kick the can and hide and seek. Well, until Jimmy, because he could win. But I always loved those because you did have somebody who was it. But if you think about it, we're all it. We're all that same space. Because when kids play and they're tapped into source, they're tapped into that infinite possibility and imagination, they're tapped into God. God doesn't live in the past, and God doesn't live in the future. God only lives right here, right now. And they are more connected to that than I can ever imagine. And I love watching them because they're so confident in it. And I'm envious because they can tap into it so quickly, like I said, in a breath. And they're there. And they're tapped in. And they're so easy with it and so confident with it. For me, it takes like meditation, and I have to do some steps to get there. I can't just jump in as easily as I watch them do it. But they really are so connected to that divine that they're it with the capital I. They're it at that moment. And I kind of wonder, when we were little and we were playing, were we so tapped into it that that's why we survived? Because I think about some of the stuff I did, and I probably shouldn't have survived. But I was so tapped into spirit that I wouldn't have thought something bad would happen. And I kind of wonder if that's not why I am still here without a broken head. Not that I didn't break some things, but for the most part, I survived. And I kind of think sometimes that's where they are in that divine space of vitality, play, ease, carefree, and recognition of source and spirit. So wrapping up the month, here's what I took from spiritual recreation and spiritual recreation. So right here, right now, I have the opportunity to tap into spirit, to tap into it, and experience the true feeling of joy and belly-busting laughter. I have the infinite opportunity to see the possibilities and to laugh while I do it and have it as fun. I can climb a tree and I can enjoy the sounds of nature and leaves rustling. And if I can't get up the tree, I can still sure stop to acknowledge it and still revel in it. And I need to play with my family. I need to play with kids. I need to play with coworkers. I don't care what they think. I may tag them. They may be it. And then I can and I will recreate my spiritual connection with God with fun, laughter, and play. And see that side of it. Because I think that's the connection I've lost. So as I challenge you, as there's been other challenges out there like the ice bucket, which by the way, awesome, awesome challenge and awesome purpose. I love the purpose for ALS. My grandmother passed away from it, and so did a dear friend. So I love the ice bucket challenge. I love what it's done for it. But today I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you to tap into that fun, tap into the source and the divine, and have fun with it, laugh through it, because tag, you're it. You can do anything. So we'll go to prayer.